Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Today we'll be taking a little step sideways from our usual path of the psychic and paranormal, afterlife reincarnation studies, and talking about human experience on other planets. Sometimes it's, how shall we say, falls under the umbrella of contact, abduction, or projection. There's quite a bit of literature has accumulated on this over the last few years, with the abduction scenario getting the most attention, I think, because it's the most dramatic and traumatic for the experiencers. But in the categories of projection and contact, there has just been this significant amount of activity. Garners less attention, however. And I feel that we should pull up our socks on this one. So, from the book Extra-Planetary Experiences, Alien-Human Contact and the Expansion of Consciousness, put together by Thomas James Streicher, published by Bear & Co. 2012. Can't get much more recent than that. I will be reading selections of an interview. And let me just preface that by saying that a number of government and covert program whistleblowers have already spoken, been interviewed, mostly by Project Camelot. There are other sources, but Project Camelot on the internet, with its vast array of, or shall I say, vast archive of interviews, people like Bob Dean and others have spoken of going to Mars via teleportation. Yes, teleportation. They claim, they state truthfully and sincerely, they say, that there is one or two teleportation portals on, shall we say, in underground bases. They can't say where, perhaps America, perhaps Australia, in which one is led down a corridor into a room and told to walk through a doorway. And when one passes through the doorway, one is in the base on Mars, with nary a blink. So, this is not entirely news, but I believe this gentleman's experiences, Gary Northcote, as I say, interviewed by Thomas James Streicher in this book. He adds a little fuel to the fire on this one. You sound very definite about that. Can you describe the civilization on this planet, if any? There are currently 3 colonies on Mars. There is a large complex of domes and glass-like towers on the north rim of Mariner Valley. There is another, smaller complex of domes at the base of Olympus, the giant volcano. And then there is another complex of domes up on Mars's Arctic Circle. The group living up there is doing terraforming. I am not aware of any other installations on Mars at the moment, nor do I know of any ancient civilizations or anything like that on the planet. Let's describe now how you actually viewed the planet. My first attempt was remote viewing. I got an image of those 3 installations and located them on the National Geographic map. Later, one of my space visitors, one of my friends, took me there physically. How did you go there physically? Aboard a ship, which picked me up here and flew me there. When you say a ship, do you mean a spacecraft? Yes, a spacecraft. So you took a spacecraft to Mars. Yes, this was my first actual trip there. So it sounds like you have been involved with this planet Mars for some time. Do you have any idea why? I have been involved with visitors from space for many, many years. Part of that involvement is that they are educating me, so I'm able to ask a lot of questions of them. I started asking questions about whether or not our own government here on Earth had any kind of secret space station on the planet Mars. At that point, they told me yes, and that is when I started investigating this. These installations on Mars are mixed installations of human military people and a wide variety of different kinds of space visitors. Were there seasons on this planet? How much time did you spend there? I spent a little over a day visiting and traveling around. There are Martian seasons which are detectable by our own science people. The colors change on the planet and their ice caps both advance and recedes. There are large sandstorms. We have huge pictures of sandstorms on Mars. I myself have a picture of a Martian sandstorm that National Geographic put out. It's hanging on my wall here. What does the sky look like? Actually, it has a slightly green tint to it, a little bit like a nice summer day here, but the color isn't blue, it's more of a greenish tint. How long is the light on there? That is, what is the light to darkness ratio? Well, again, this is well known to our scientists. I don't remember the details of it, but they have much longer days because the orbit is different. Did you see any vegetation? I did not. The portions that I saw looked like sand and rock desert, maybe a little like the Gobi Desert. What was the color of the ground? Reddish. There is a reddish tint. Could you compare it to anything here on Earth? I have not seen sand and rocks that were exactly that color, but it looked very normal sand and rock. There was nothing terribly unusual about it. It was exactly like the pictures that came back from Viking. Reddish colored ground with sandy texture. Yes, sand and rocks. Did you see any animal life there? Oh, nothing other than people in the buildings. And these people in the buildings, were they humanoid or something else? It was a mix. There were some American and Russian military officers who were actually condemned to be there. They had been lied to. They were told that they would be there for just a few months, but they are left there for the rest of their lives. Mixed in with them were the gray Zetas that everyone talks about. You know, the short guys with the big black eyes that you see in all the cartoons and stuff. But there were also humans from other planets. The one who was ferrying me around, for instance, is a tall human being with silver hair. He is from the fourth planet of Altar, absolutely human, and he is one of my chief mentors. He is one of the people who are teaching me. In addition, I saw some mantas. These appeared to be, I guess, maybe 7 feet tall. Very, very slender insects with insect compound eyes and antennae. When I met one of them, I shook his claw and we had a conversation. There were others there too. There was a big shaggy-headed fellow who looked a little bit like a yeti. He was short and wide instead of tall and thin. So quite a wide variety of people. Could you be more precise about your actual physical trip to the planet or your remote viewing? No, I was there. I was inside the building in the main complex. They have taken you there how many times? 3 times. Aboard spacecraft? Yes. Did you see any natural resources available on this planet? I did not personally see that. I was told that there is a variety of mineral resources, but I don't have any personal observation of that. Did you experience any noises or lights? Well, inside the building there were artificial lights, nothing that was not artificial. I was not out on the surface of the planet. I was only inside buildings. I was also inside a flying craft, an expedition craft. They took me in it to fly over the other 2 sites, but I never landed on those 2 sites or got into them. So do you mean you were not physically exposed to the environment? I only saw the environment through the windows. I was not out there. It would take an environmentally protective suit to do that, and I was mainly interested in meeting the people. Were there any kinds of buildings, vehicles, or underground tunnels on this planet? I was told there are underground tunnels, but I was never shown that. I was in 2 very large buildings. One of them was a white dome-shaped building much larger than a football stadium here. The other building was a glass tower. At least it looked like glass. It was a smooth, rounded tower. It did not have square corners or anything like that. I was taken to that building in a ground vehicle, but it didn't have wheels. It floated from the dome over to this tower. The tower was about the size of our power and light building in Kansas City here. It was about the size and shape, but it was all rounded and shiny glass, or it appeared like shiny glass. I was taken inside that and given a tour of the building. Did you see any other buildings around? This complex was a cluster of buildings, but they were all connected in what was almost one large building. Do you mean kind of like the Pentagon building in Washington? Nothing with hard edges. Everything here was smooth and rounded. No, I mean in being connected together. You say that they were shiny. Could they also be transparent? It wasn't transparent, it was almost mirrored, but it was a white mirrored appearance. These buildings ought to be very clearly visible from space, but our own satellites that are around Mars are not taking pictures in the areas where these things are located. So do you think the US government and NASA might be aware of some of these things? Oh yes. They have shipped officers up there. The original intent, I was told, was an agreement with space visitors for an exchange of technology. They were going to have a major super base there, but the people there essentially declared their independence and broke off from the Earth government. This is all part of the Cheney-Bush junk. Then our government people stopped sending ships there and left the people stranded. The humans, Americans and Russians, who are there joined in what you might call a revolution, and simply declared their independence for reasons of morality. Did any of that make sense? Yes, it sure does. Do you have any other descriptions of the planet that struck you or stood out? It looked to me at the moment that it was not a very habitable planet. I have studied a lot of astronomy. It's in the habitable range. It's one of those planets that could support life at some point in its evolution, but it doesn't look like it's quite there. However, it looks like the people who are there are changing that and terraforming it into a habitable family. I asked them why they were doing that, and I was told that long-term, over 1,000 years, they see it as a major planet for both species, for the human species and from the ones from outer space, to share, and that was their goal. At the moment, the atmosphere is too thin, the water is all underground, and it's just not ready to do that yet. From space, it looks a lot more like the moon than the Earth. It is rock and sand with little white caps, and you see changing seasons because parts of the planet change color every year. That was my first impression. You mentioned a city? The first complex that I described to you, the one with the domes and the towers, that amounts to a small city. There was a greenish tint to the sky, there were no clouds at all, and the 2 Martian moons were too small for me to see from the surface of the planet. Was anything else visible? No. Do you feel satisfied with your description? Yes. What was your reaction to your experience on another planet? There was a sense of awe just from the reality of being there. Also, there was intense questioning. I was surrounded by all this really marvelous stuff. I was in a building with a wide variety of people, some of whom were not even human. I was talking to people about the nature of their political structure and what was happening in the galaxy at large. This is just amazing, absolutely amazing. I should tell you immediately that these are all good people. They are friendly people. There are no nasty, evil monsters in this group of people. They are not here to conquer the world or anything like that. They are mainly here as a kind of Peace Corps, hoping to help us through a step in evolution that is very difficult for us. So they regard themselves primarily as teachers, and that's how I received them. They are teachers. So it was a marvelous experience. I mean, it was just glorious. How do you think this experience affected you, or is affecting you? No. Oh well, it's still affecting me. It is opening doors, changing my view of the world, changing my philosophy and my view of life into something that is much nicer, more peaceful, and more hopeful. When you were on this other planet, what were you thinking and feeling? I was thinking, my God, I'm actually here. And I was also thinking that there is a universal problem called the confabulation concept in psychology, and it generally refers to the mind's absolute infinite capacity to simply make up thoughts, images, and memories. The human mind can create a scene of events that is so absolutely realistic that you can't tell that it is a false memory. In all my experiences with this kind of thing, I kept confabulation in mind. And all you can do with that is that you can ask the doubting question, is this real, or am I making it up because it is such a thrilling idea? And know that you can't really tell at the time if it's real or not. What you can do is try to seek confirmation of it. You can get confirmation from other people. Then you have a good idea that this is really happening. And I was aware at the time that this could be some kind of incredibly long, detailed fantasy dream that my own mind was making up. I assume you have encountered this kind of idea before. Certainly, but I also think it could be important. So what I do after I have one of these bizarre experiences is I look for confirmation. There are several kinds of confirmation. One of them is that there are many reports from many other people, who have had these kind of experiences describing exactly the same thing. They have seen buildings on Mars, they have talked to people from outer space who basically told them the same thing. I didn't know these at the time I had my experiences. I only learned about these episodes with other people after I had my experiences. So it's not like I saw something on television and filed it away in my memory and dragged it up again. So that's what I call confirmation, and I have had that. I have not met another person in the world who has visited the place that I have visited on Mars. I've met quite a few people who have remote viewed the same place that I have visited on Mars, describing the exact same buildings. So there is something to it. It's not just a dream. Mainly, though, I was just amazed at the experience and the people I was meeting, especially the non-human people. In other reports, most people tend to be talking about the little grey zetas, and there were some of those there, but frankly they seemed to me not terribly important. That is, not leadership people. The leadership people were the humans, from what they reported to be the Altar system and stars in the Orion system, and the non-humans. I was mainly fascinated by the non-humans. This Manta character has been with me my whole life. I didn't know that at the time, I only learned that later, but he has popped in and out of my life routinely since I was born. He is genial, he has a dry wit, he will tease a little bit, he enjoys calling me Earthling, but he says it in a kind of funny way. He will turn and talk to another of his species in a high, chattering, almost an electronic kind of language that makes no sense. But then he turns to me and speaks to me in a resonating baritone voice. In getting familiar with our customs, he put his claw out for me to shake in a handshake, which I did. I could feel the hard surface of the claw, and I could smell him. He has a detectable smell, not very pleasant, almost musty smelling. I perceived him through the major human senses, and I couldn't help but feel amazed that I was standing in front of this guy, and he was actually talking to me and telling me about the universe. This was just amazing. So that is my general impression of the whole trip. When you were on this other planet, do you recall any emotions or feelings that you can identify with? Well, if you're talking about the other people there, they were all excited. These are people who are involved in what they believe to be extremely important work. I was thinking more about what you were feeling. My feeling continued to be just, oh wow, for the most part. I never had a sense of fear of anything at all, not even remotely. No hint of unease of any kind. In fact, it was much more joy. It was more, I want to be with these people. This is wonderful. It was an ecstatic kind of feeling. What do you think was the most meaningful part of this experience on another planet? Becoming aware of their sense of really wanting to help us, that they are there to help. They're not going to bail us out. They're not going to come in and fix all our problems. They have the capability to do that, but they're not going to do it. They are a tough love kind of people. When you say that, if they came in and landed on the White House lawn and corrected all the crimes and showed us a new economic system and all that kind of stuff, It would weaken us too much. It would make us dependent upon outside help. We have to learn our own strengths, and they are going to help us do that. That is to help individual people become enlightened people, so that we can then solve those problems. I suppose the main thing would be a sense of hope. There is a chance that we can learn to change things with the help of these people teaching us as individuals. So I would sum it up as hope. Anyway, selected moments from an interview with Gary Northcott by T.J. Streicher. I hope I haven't quoted anything out of context, but it is a long interview and I had to do some kind of editing. And I would suggest, if you want to follow this up, there's plenty more on base on Mars that you can track down, underground bases here, teleportation, plenty on Project Camelot. In fact, more than you can handle. The archive there is huge. But I think it's important for us to, on the Word of God, to broach these realities, these experiences, and let them filter in as we uncover our own evolutionary journey, the depth of our own evolutionary journey on this planet. For I believe, it is my experience, inwardly, spiritually, that we arrived on Earth as monads, as higher selves, from elsewhere. We had done much evolving in different paradigms in other planetary systems. I have an inkling that I was a resident of Sirius for a long while. And when I use the word I, obviously, I'm using it very, loosely. The I that came here is not the I that's looking at you now. I am part of that I, but I'm not all of that I, as are you. Whether the official admission of the base on Mars will come or just leak out, as things have a tendency to do, leak out. Maybe there'll be another Edward Snowden that will release this information, but there is actually plenty of it on the internet already. Whether you choose to believe it or not is another story. That is part of your story, as this is part of my story. Let all our stories come together in as chaotic and as an entertaining a way as possible. Why not? We might as well have fun while we're on our way. So, Word of God, so long for now. Brotherhood of man and all that stuff. Brotherhood of all sentient beings. Love and peace on this rather tense weekend as we see what happens in Syria. And let the spirit of compassion and mercy prevail.